Good morning. Today we are observing the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr., one of the founding fathers of the modern civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. inspired many people to stand up against racial inequality and take a stand against police brutality in the 1960s. Both of these issues are still pervasive today. Today, young black men like me are racially profiled and, and harassed by both regular citizens and even the police who are supposed to serve and protect our communities. Since I was 7 years old, I have been told that I must always be careful about what I do, where, and how I act so I won't be perceived as a threat. Many people perceive black people as threats because of our skin color and what we wear. Racial profiling and violence were common parts of the African American experience in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. To show the injustice of past, I will start with the story of Medgar Evers. Medgar Evers was a civil rights activist living in Mississippi. He was a member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. One morning in 1963, he was returning home from an NAACP meeting and was shot by a Ku Klux Klan member in his front yard. His killer eluded conviction until 30 years later. More nationally, he received full military honors and was buried in the National Cemetery, Arlington, Virginia. Racial violence was also a reality for African American women. In 1944, Gracie Taylor was a young wife and mother walking home from a church service she'd attended in Abbeville, Alabama, and when she was abducted and 6 armed white men left blindfolded by the side of the road coming home from church. They threatened to kill her if she ever told anyone, but her story was reported to the NAACP, where a young worker named Rosa Parks became the lead investigator on her case, and together they sought justice. But justice wasn't an option in the era of Jim Crow. Justice wasn't an option in the age of Dr. King. True justice continues to be an elusive reality for many African Americans today. When he delivered his I Have a Dream speech, Martin Luther King Jr. said he'd hoped that someday his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Since he gave that speech on August 28, 1963, the dreams he had still have not come true, and we know this because of the things that are still going on. The idea of police brutality was very much on people's mind in 1963, and they continue to be in the following years and decades. You do not have to be an African American male to care about this issue. In fact, here are 2 reasons why you should care. First, you should care about racial profiling and police brutality against African Americans if you care about the human life. Racial profiling and police brutality against African Americans, racial profiling and police brutality still exists, and African American men are the most common targets. As a result, millions of African American boys, including myself, not only have to learn how to stay safe at all time, but especially when dealing with law enforcement. Racial profiling is the use of someone's race or ethnicity to determine whether they were likely to commit an offense. Police brutality is the unnecessary force by police dealing with civilians. Both continue today and have led to tense relationships between African American citizens and law enforcement personnel because of innocent lives being lost. Here are just a few of these stories. On July 17, 2014, Eric Garner, father of 6, died at Staten Island, New York, after being choked to death by an NYPD police officer. The officer mistook Eric Garner as a drug dealer because he was a heavier man wearing saggy clothes. It was reported that Mr. Garner gasped 11 times that he couldn't breathe to the officer. The officer continued to choke him until he died. It took one long year for the jury to decide if Officer Daniel Battaglia was guilty. His killer lost his job but walked free. In Florida, during February of 2012, Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old wearing a black hoodie, was walking in the gated community on the way back from a convenience store. He had Skittles and an Arizona iced tea, and he was shot and killed by the off-duty officer security guard because he was perceived as a thug. His killer, George Zimmerman, walked free after being put on the trial for Trayvon's murder. In April 2015, Walter Scott, a 50-year-old black man, was stopped for a non-functioning brake light by a white officer, Michael Slager. The routine traffic stop ended with Walter Scott being shot to death. 2 years later, Officer Slager pleaded guilty of violating civil rights and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. This is one case This is one case where the justice systems ruled in favor of the murdered victim. However, African American men are often killed as a consequence of racial profiling, and often their murders are free. After the Eric Garner case, it took jury 1 year to determine that Daniel Patalio would not be punished for killing Eric Garner. In the Trayvon Martin case, George Zimmerman was not convicted and did not have a consequence at all. The second reason you should care about this issue is because if violence and racism like this continues, one day it could happen to you or your members of your family. Historically, racism has been the cause of terrible treatment of blacks in America. Racism and violence still exist today. It has been going on since the age of slavery in the United States. People tell me that the fight for freedom from slavery is over, but right now, it doesn't feel like it or look like it. For instance, I see the statistic that 223 unarmed black men have been racially profiled and killed by police since August 2017.